I don't know about you, um, but at least for me, at times the Christian life can be struggle. It can be frustrating. It can be a struggle. And yes, I've shared before in other places and even other videos about my struggles with doubt, or even with struggle with at times seeing myself clearly, and even being confident in who God has made me. But this morning I was struggling with a little bit of a different aspect. I was struggling and getting frustrated that there are certain aspects that I have been working on with myself, repenting of and asking the Lord to transform in me, and it seems like I've been working on it for years. There's a practice that I think takes more courage than what people give it credit for. Journaling. I mean, yes, the very act of writing. But it's that second part that I honestly don't do typically, and that is going back and reading what I've written years earlier. I made a mistake of doing that recently. And I say it that way because honestly, I had just poured my heart out in my journal to the Lord. And I found one of my old journals as I was doing something later that day. And I opened it up and began reading it. And what really broke my heart was that some of the stuff that I was reading in those entries from 4 or 5 years ago was the same stuff I was praying to the Lord that morning. And I had this moment like, have I changed at all? Am I any further down the road than what I was 4 or 5 years ago? It's one of those moments where I got frustrated because I was like, surely at this point, I've grown more than this. Surely at this point, I've changed more than this. Surely I have transformed after all of this time. And after all of these prayers, and even after all of the money I've spent on counseling, surely I'm not still wrestling with the same stuff I did 4 or 5 years ago. And I got so demoralized. And then I remembered this passage and reread it. It comes from Luke chapter 13. Luke chapter 13, Jesus is talking to his disciples, and they're wrestling with this idea at times about like a problem of evil. But Jesus instead decides to peer a little bit closer into the people themselves. And Jesus has this strong exhortation that what we need to focus on more than anything is not why does this tragic thing happen to this person, or why did this tragic thing not happen to this other person, and try to figure out the why. Is this person good, better than this person? Is this person evil? Is that why? He says no. He says what you need to focus on is repenting and transformation in the present. Quit looking around and trying to explain why suffering and evil is happening. Instead, focus on your own transformation in the present. And then Jesus tells a parable that I needed to hear anew this morning. He says in Luke chapter 13, verses 6 through 9. In verse 6, it says, Then Jesus told this parable. A man had a fig tree growing in his vineyard, and he went to look for fruit on it, but he didn't find any. So he said to the man who took care of the vineyard, for 3 stinking years now, I've been coming to look for fruit on this fig tree, and I haven't found any. He's frustrated. It's like I plant this tree, after 3 years, there's still no fruit? There's still no progress? Then he gives this command, second half of verse 7. He says, cut it down. I mean, why should we use up the soil any longer? Cut it down. Just stop it. If it's not going to produce fruit, then let's get rid of it. And then the man replies, and he offers 3 ingredients we often overlook. He says, sir, leave it alone for 1 more year. I'll dig around it and fertilize it. And if it bears fruit next year, fine. If not, then cut it down. And what's fascinating is that's the end of the parable. It's almost like Luke's gospel assumes, or Jesus assumed, that solves the issue. But notice what the caretaker of the vineyard argued for. Number one, and I'm not going in order. Number one, he argues to dig around the tree. In other words, sometimes what we need to do in order to push deeper into our own transformation is to unearth a little bit more and get to the root. Because there are times whenever what we say is, I've worked really hard. And it's not that that's not true. But sometimes you can work really hard and not actually make very much progress. I watch my kids do this. Man, they go out into the yard to mow or to rake leaves, and they spend so much time out there complaining about what they're doing. Or they spend so much time focusing on things that actually aren't the real goal, that every once in a while they come in and they complain, and I say, tell me exactly everything you did. And when they start to list it, you realize they've spent a lot of time. They just weren't spending a lot of time doing the right things. If there are certain areas of your life that you're not seeing fruit in, sometimes it's good to go back to the root and dig a little deeper, unearth it some more. The second thing the caretaker says is, he says, and then I will fertilize it. And sometimes what you need to do is just give yourself a little grace. Give yourself grace. That this won't happen overnight. That yes, you've been working hard on it for some time, but maybe all it needs is a little bit of grace. Stop berating yourself and realize that actually wastes your energy. Focus your energy on the things that will build you up, not the things that will lament and tear you down. But then there's one other element that actually the caretaker brings up at the beginning of his response and ends with it. He says, sir, leave it alone for 1 more year. I'll dig around it and fertilize it. If it bears fruit next year, fine. This is the other ingredient. Time. Just give it time. Sometimes what we do is we get so frustrated that our prayer practices didn't produce the fruit we wanted, or the confession didn't immediately change it, or the books that we've read didn't immediately, or the counseling sessions didn't immediately. I understand. Transformation does not happen overnight, and we wouldn't want it that way anyway. Because by definition, transformation or growth that happens too quick is cancer. Cancer cells, they're overgrowing. Instead, give it time. And if you take time and you combine it with grace, and you combine it with the truth that you might need to unearth some more, what you will find is that in the next year, fruit will come. My challenge for you this week is this. Go back and review the one thing you want to focus on, not just for the next week, but for the next month. Maybe you need to dig a little more. Maybe you need to give yourself some grace. Or maybe what you need to do is just recommit to giving it more time. And allow the Holy Spirit to do what the Spirit does best. Make us brand new. I love you guys. Have a good week.